Hello, everyone. If you're watching this, then that means you survived the rapture. So, congratulations. What was that? Okay. It's really dark, and I just saw something weird. Okay, anyway, where was I? Yeah, so we survived the rapture, so we don't have to worry about that. Um, this is my third or fourth rapture that I've survived. So, I think the reason I was left behind this time was I've become a liberal. So, I'm gonna have to work on that. The evangelical community that I'm in doesn't really follow the whole rapture thing. Yeah, they weren't really a part of that, but I just wanted to poke some fun. It's like time and time and again, there's this like whole idea that the world is going to end, and then it doesn't. Uh, so I just wanted to make some fun. Anyway, today I wanted to talk about the ongoing whitewashing of Charlie Kirk. Since I made the last video, I've had multiple conversations that were pretty revealing with people in the evangelical community, and I just wanted to share some of those conversations with you. Recently, I made a Facebook post about Charlie Kirk, and it was kind of in response to all of the posts from the evangelical community about, how Charlie Kirk was a great guy and he just stood up for what was right and all this sort of lionizing of him. And I just made this post that said more or less, if you can't see Charlie Kirk's racism, then you don't see yours either. And it's a little provocative and a little accusatory. And it sparked multiple conversations in personal, direct messages. I'm currently in conversation with this guy who I know personally. And we're going back and forth every 12 hours or so. But, he messaged me after, I made my Facebook post. And he was like, "Hey, I think you're misrepresenting Charlie Kirk. Charlie Kirk wasn't a racist. He just cared about merit and et cetera, et cetera." And I keep having this situation where all these different people who I'm talking to, you know, they're talking to me like I'm some far left wing liberal who has no idea who Charlie Kirk really was. But it's like, guys, I grew up with you. Like I was a Republican Christian conservative for the majority of my life. Charlie Kirk became popular while I was in high school. Like I watched. I mean, it's embarrassing to say now, but I watched Charlie Kirk, Steven Crowder, and Ben Shapiro. Like those were my guys that I watched, and it's like I'd be willing to bet that I know more about Charlie Kirk's rhetoric than like 90% of the people who are talking about him. So they come to me with these clips, and it's like, hey, Charlie Kirk wasn't really racist. See, here's a video of him talking about how DEI discriminates against white people, and it's like, yeah, I'm familiar with those arguments. I used to make those talking points. I used to fall for the plausible deniability. I could probably make their arguments better than they're making them. He made one comment in our conversation that was particularly disturbing to me. In the conversation, I was talking about how Charlie Kirk embraced the Great Replacement theory, which is a white supremacist theory that believes that the elites or the Jews, as it is often the case, has this grand plan of bringing in brown people and Jewish people and Asian people into our country to replace white people. And I brought that up to him, and I was like, "Hey, Charlie Kirk believes in this theory," and he pretty much ignored it, which of course he would. I mean, that's a pretty damning belief to have if we're talking about whether or not Charlie Kirk is racist. So he pretty much ignored my point that I was making. And he immediately just told me, he's like, "Hey, what belief or what practical laws was Charlie Kirk advocating for that was racist?" He told me he doesn't care about his personal views. It's not about personal views. What was his practical laws that he was advocating for that was racist? And that really disturbed me because what he's basically saying is he doesn't care about personalized bigotry and personalized racism. His idea of racism is simply whether or not there are laws. If there's a whites only bathroom, that's the only thing that he would actually find disturbing. And that's such a arrogant, ignorant, and privileged opinion to have. I mean, and I told him, I was like, being racist is not a victimless crime. Black communities and black people feel it, and they live it every day. And so that was infuriating. And he was shifting the goalpost there because he was sort of acknowledging, yeah, Charlie Kirk had some pretty racist views. However, because he wasn't advocating for any laws that advocated for segregation or something, that excused his racist views. And I told him not only did he have racist views, but he had great influence over an entire generation of conservative evangelical men, especially the younger generation. That is far from a victimless crime. The Facebook post that I made, I also made some pretty heavy accusations against the evangelical church. Uh, I made statements basically saying that the church is announcing to the world that we believe in white Jesus because we are choosing to celebrate and honor a well known racist. And it's showing the world that we don't really take racism seriously. And that aspect to the post that I made started a lot of conversations because a lot of people in my friend group, or I guess my former friend group, but a lot of people that are Facebook friends, felt personally attacked by that, which they probably should have because I was making an accusation. In the post, I made the point that us Christians will preach and will say that Christianity is for all people and it's for all races. And, Jesus said, go and tell all the world, we're supposed to be welcoming to all people. And I made the point that when on Sunday we preach that we're for all mankind, and then on Monday we join a We Are Charlie Kirk rally, our actions sort of delegitimize our sermon. And I made the point that our actions need to align with our words. And I had, a few people kind of comment saying, hey, like, I believe that we shouldn't be racist and that, we should be inclusive of all races and all people, which is great. But they were missing the point that I was making, where by celebrating Charlie Kirk and talking about him as if he was this great speaker, we're communicating to the world that we align with his views. And his views are very much against the views of Jesus. It's upsetting to me that the people that I grew up with, you know, I have multiple family members that are pastors, the people that I grew up respecting refuse to acknowledge their own racism. And I told them, I was like, I used to be on your side. I used to be super racist. It took a lot of self-reflection to and a lot of listening to be able to see my own racism. And when we sit together and you watch the exact same clip of Charlie Kirk defending his reasoning as to why he believes the Civil Rights Act was a mistake, we're both watching the same clip, and you have rationalized it, or they have rationalized why black people deserve less than white people. And we're both watching the same video and coming to completely different conclusions. It's like debating whether or not the Pope is Catholic. Like, if you're watching Charlie Kirk and you don't see his racism, clearly we have different definitions of what racism is, which I believe is true. I think a lot of people who are defending Charlie Kirk think that he wasn't racist. He was just a quote unquote realist. He was realistic. In other words, racism is just a fact of life. People genuinely believe that black people and brown people are less intelligent than white people. And that's the conclusion that I keep coming to when I'm talking to these people. They say, well, it's just based on merit. Like, okay, then how come you're saying that all the white people have more merit than black people? And when we try to parse through the details of DEI and how DEI gave opportunity, and there's a discussion to be had on whether or not programs like affirmative action is needed. I think it is, but there's at least a discussion there. But if someone takes that opportunity, gets into a college, and then graduates with honors, that person is very qualified. And someone like Charlie Kirk, and the message that he teaches is that we should doubt black competency. He said, black women don't have the brain processing power. His view is based on a worldview that black people biologically are inferior. That's the truth. And it's sad that a lot of the people that I grew up with can't see through that or believe that even. So that's all I have for today. It's a little bit shorter than usual, but just wanted to share some of those conversations. Thanks for listening.